Good morning, dear colleagues. So let's get started. Our session today will be devoted to technological development of cities and cities placed in the center of the process of technological development. When it comes to the quality of life in the city, we have to admit that any large city not only should consume technologies and be a customer of all those tech developers, but should also generate these technologies. We have a panel of experts here today, those who you see on the stage and those who are sitting in the front row. These experts represent the tech side of urban development. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Alexei Gusev, and I'm the development director of Innovation Russian venture company. This is one of the key technological institutions of Russia. I'm responsible for initiatives like National Technology Initiative, and also I'm responsible for certain bits of developing digital economy. And we are interested in making sure that Moscow and other large cities of Russia actively participate in the process of tech development. We want these cities to become technological hubs which attract money, startups, human resources. We have a well-represented panel of experts here. We have a representative of Tel Aviv administration, Chief Technology Officer, Leora Shakhter. We have Alexei Porabachev here today, the General Director of the Innovations Energy, and Alexei Khokhlov, Vice President of the Russian Academy of Science. Russian Academy of Science is the federal-level organization. However, we know that it plays an important part in development of Moscow. And we also have first-tier experts, but I will introduce them later when it comes to Q&A session. And now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Leora Shakhter.
Technological development in the capital of Israel. We all know that Israel is nicknamed as Startup Nation. So please tell us, what's the role of its capital in the technological development?
First of all, you have to understand the culture in Israel. The culture in Israel says that every person do not take guaranteed any fact that is said to him. He has to question if the fact is right or wrong, and he has to prove how it is wrong. So by understanding startup ecosystem, you must understand that it's part of the nature of the Israeli not to accept anything as guarantees. So we ask ourselves questions again and again and again. So that makes us explore new things and new ideas and try to prove or disapprove to things that are going on in the city. So let me give you a peek of what we are doing in the city of Tel Aviv relating to startup. First of all, you mentioned that Israel is the startup nation, and the startups are concentrated in the center, in Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv, we have the highest rate of startup per capita in the world. We have the highest rate of incubators per capita in the world, and that's related to the cultural issue that I spoke to in the beginning. We have about 1,500 startups in the city. Currently, in the city, it is about 60% growth in the past decade. So not that everyone is a startupist, but it is growing. You can see people that are working in traditional workspaces. In the afternoon, they are establishing a new startup because it's the way to get richer or the way to get the better job along the way. So as a city, seeing that we have that flourishing ecosystem of startup, we understand that we want to collaborate with the startups. We want to inject the innovation that they bring into the city hall. So what we did is really create a framework of how the city is going to work and collaborate with the startups. And I will show you that we have about 4 different tools of how to collaborate with startups. I will elaborate on some of them. And the first one is a startup committee. We understood that we want to talk to the startups. We want to hear their ideas. And more than that, we want to help them, even if it's not related to the municipality. So in order to do that, the first stage was to understand what the startups can need from us. Is it even a tax reduction? Is it about exposing a new database that the municipality owns? Is it just to be able to talk to a municipal expert? Or if their product is mature enough, we can try it. And of course, we could have workspaces for startups. So we define the services that the city can give to the startups, and we are meeting with them. In the past year, I think that we met with about 150 different startups. To some of them, we gave it advice. To some of them, we really helped. And some of them are established in one of the 4 workspaces that we have in the city for startup. You can see this picture, for instance. This is an old library, which we took part of the library and transform it into an innovation center. And you can see people that coming to change book from one side, and young children that are developing software on the other hand. Of course, as a city, one of the most important assets that we have is the database, and we expose more and more databases in our open data. And a lot of cities does that. But if you look at the open data, the only data that you can expose in it, it's really statistic, general data, of course not personalized data. Sometimes the more advanced cities even give real-time data, transportation-like, and so on. And we do this as well. But we have done that for the past 2 years. And we see very little usage of the open data in Tel Aviv. And since we are meeting with startups, we kept asking them, why don't you use the open data? And the answer was that it's not really useful. Because if you want to develop an application, you need a personalized data. For instance, if you are developing an app that could pay a lot of things through it, you need from the municipality your own data about the taxes in order to pay it. That's one thing. The other thing is you really want to make transaction into the municipality, be able to pay, for instance, into the municipality servers and application. So open data does not cover personal data, and does not cover the ability to make actions into the municipality, IT actions. So understanding that, what we are developing now is, we call it open architecture, the ability of apps like Pepper, which is a virtual wallet, to really coordinate with the city databases, applications, and so on. Having that architecture is very, very dangerous, because you can imagine in that area of cyber attacks, and we have a lot of them, it is very convenient to enter into the city IT structure and get databases and do a lot of action. So we have to have a protection layer in order to do that, and we have, of course, to set the regulation of how the private data is giving to the application, having his agreement to give the data of the person, having contract with the application, and so on and so on. And we are working on that framework. I believe we'll finalize it in the next 3 to 4 months, and then we'll be able to start operating the new architecture. The second tool that we are doing is a lot of meetups and hackathon. For this year, we have done already 3 hackathons. This example is about education, and the idea is how to get the young children out of the screens, not into the screen, but out of the screens. They will have enough time to be in the screen in the later years. So we got a lot of people that participate. You can see them here. The one with the red velvet is our mayor. But you can see even very young children that took place in the hackathon. We had a hackathon about business, how we can help business, and how can we help them coordinate with the residents. And this hackathon took place just last weekend. It's about how can we give the parents tool to deal with the very small children in the kindergarten, in houses, and so on and so on. So having hackathons is part of our strategy, and we are doing a lot of them in the past month. But I think the most important project to collaborate with startups is we establish an innovation center. We call it City Zone. It's a beta site for exploring smart city solutions. It's a collaboration with Tel Aviv University, and we are having multinational companies come and be a partner in City Zone. You can see the first one, Dell, Renault Mitsubishi. I must tell you that we established the City Zone only in the last 4 months, so it is very new. And the role of the municipality is first to publish the city challenges, because we do not want to accept every startup. It has to be related to our most difficult challenges. So I will share with you a few of them. The first one is improving the quality of life of the elderly with apps, with the programs and so on, because that's a very important problem for us, for every city, but for us, we understand that loneliness is one of the biggest enemy at that age, and we want to help the elderly. So that's one challenge. The other one is related to cameras and analytics. And every city has a lot of cameras that are spread, and the first implementation of every city is security. So we want to expand even more than that to operational events of the city, because it's like an eyes that we have in the street. We are not interested in personalized information, just to see events that are important to running the city, overflowing trash bin, and so on and so on. But what is the biggest challenge is getting a relevant analytics, because we have about 1,000 cameras. You in Moscow you have a lot more than that, but the ability to extract a real event is a real challenge. So having that challenge around security and around sanitation is one of the 2 challenges that we have. And of course, having an efficient mobility as a service solution in the city for us, it's very, very important, because our public transportation is not so well. We didn't prepare ourselves in the early years for public transportation or relevant public transportation, and we are beginning just this year. So that was the first stage, the first target of the municipality, the challenges. The second is injecting technology into the area of a City Zone, and each startup that accepted to City Zone will get 1 year accompanied with the IT of the municipality, accompanied by the professional guys in the municipality. Depends what was your idea. And our final idea is really to deploy the solution all over the city. If the solution will be mature and good, we'll do it. And another task of City Zone is collaboration between innovation hub around the world. We started with Berlin, and we'll be more than welcome to do the same with Moscow, because we believe sharing information, sharing startups is very important, and it's really the ability of startup to grow not just to one country. Israel is a rather small country, to other countries and other markets as well. So having experience with startups in the past 3 years, what we established in Israel is really a cookbook for startups, how to work with municipality, and cookbook for municipality, how to work with startups. And if that is interesting for you, we'll love to share this as well.
Thank you very much. Вопросы?
Any questions? Any questions at all? I have a question, but I'm holding it back for now. I have a brief question to ask. I would say that generally all cities, to some extent, collaborate with startups, and this cooperation is focused on the same issues and challenges simply because startups face similar challenges and cities face similar challenges. You touched a very interesting point, like providing data to startups and involving multinational corporations in supporting startups in multinational in tech hubs. But what Tel Aviv can provide to startups as the test ground for different startup projects? And do you see this as a priority now? Like testing new technologies in urban environment in Tel Aviv, like new technologies in healthcare, transportation, and in other areas of city life.
Very adaptive. We like to have new experiments, but more than having experiments, I think what characterizes Tel Aviv is we are very practical. We are not doing a lot of experiment. We are doing one experiment, see if it's good, and then we are deploying it all over the city. So a practical approach is what gets us what we did in Tel Aviv. And what we publish are really the most hard challenges that we have. Not just saying having the city clean. It's not enough. Every city wants to be clean, and your city is
Но здесь недостаточно просто сказать.
But the ability to have that kind of sensors, all the cameras, and use it as eyes.
Технологическое решение, основанное на сети камер наружного наблюдения. И так, чтобы эти камеры могли в реальном масштабе времени
That's the objective. So it's very practical, very focused, and if any will solve our problem, and we are on the way of that, we are surely going to deploy it all over the city. So I think our best strength is the ability to deploy. You have the customer. We are the customer. So every startup who has a customers who do not come at the end, but are willing to invest money and time in order to let them learn and get better and better and better, that's a big asset that does not exist in other fields.
Such interesting presentation. So my question concerning government support. So do you subsidize startup? Have you a special governmental strategy concerning startups? And what's your main focus? Is just attract international investment in startup sphere or create your own startup culture within country? So thank you.
First of all, our mayor says we are not a smart city, we are smart people. As I said in the beginning, they really do not need our help in order to start. There's a startup scene, and we did nothing in order to make it. It just happened in the city. So the question is just helping them to succeed. And we are not funding them, but there is funding from the government level. There is an Innovation Institute of Israel, and they are funding startups. We as a city do not, but we are trying to give them tools to succeed. tools, and if there are startups in our areas, and then the ability to really test the product, improve them, and then one of the things that we had to change in order to make it happen is the way that we contract with them, the procurement processes, because as a municipality, you have to publish a tender for everything that you're doing. And we have to change the way that we communicate with that. Have a very small group of people decide, and not the mayor, if we can contract with them. Of course, it's a low-budget contract because we do not want to break the rules, but we change the way that we contract with them because we understand it's a different kind of world.
I was curious what the lead time is typically in that regard, from the first contact to actually engaging with the startups. And okay, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
I think it will take about 2 to 3 months to make it really real contact. The first thing is in our website you have the form to reach us. Then we'll invite you to one of the startup committees, see what you need from us, see how interesting is your idea, and then continue from that on. And what we started doing is every startup committee has a subject. It can be financial, it can be healthcare, and so on. And in that committee, we are bringing people from the professional department, so they can really evaluate if the idea is good and relevant for them. And if they see the startup and the people in their own eyes, they lit. They want to take the idea and move it to the field. So the combination of technical or innovation people and professional together evaluating as a process is very, very successful.
Good day, Leora. My name is Dvarenkin Peter. It was really interesting to listen to your presentation. What we do, we try to promote, we try to assist for Russian startups to develop in Russia as well as in other countries. Recently, I have become a consultant for Russian-Israel Business Council, and so we would like. Do you have an experience for implementing Russian startups in Israel, or do you have some assist for them? Thank you.
First of all, unfortunately, not. There is some kind of borders between international startups and community and the Israeli one. And I think we should do something about it. Think how we can collaborate together. It can be through innovation hubs that startups from Russia are communicating with startups in Israel and cities in Israel, or any other way that we can think about together. But there's a little bit of a wall nowadays, and we should do something in order to change that.
Спасибо большое, Леора.
Thank you very much, Leora. So I have the question to our moderator, but because I'm the moderator as well, and I'm caring about the timeline of our discussion, so that's why I will ask this question probably later on, or I will just go on without any question. So I will try and speak in parallel way. It won't be easy, but I will try. So right now, I would like to give a floor to Mr. Barabichev Alexei, who is director of the Innovative Agency of Moscow City. And now, oh, that's good. I will be able to pronounce those two questions. First one is about the technological entrepreneurship in Moscow and in Russia in general. What's your take on it? And then about the program which was launched by Moscow government, city council, about technological cluster it seems to be that it's rather interesting initiative. So can we find out more about that, about technological entrepreneurship and etc.? So you are having the floor. Thank you very much. So before I answer those two questions, a couple words as the continuation of our great report about Tel Aviv. So directly, it sends us to the topics of technological entrepreneurship in Moscow, but there is a great difference between Tel Aviv and Moscow. In the same way, it's pretty dynamically developing capital as well. So if in Tel Aviv you've got startups and you don't need to be concerned about the growth of this number of startups, and your startups are going into international markets as well, so you've got this nurturing, good nurturing, nutritious broth, we would call it. But as of now, in Moscow, we don't have this good and thick startup broth, and so that's why the task of the Moscow City Council is being split in 4 big blocks. So the first one is the matter of engagement, of involvement. So we've got about 4,000 students who study and finish higher education institutions. So it's a huge potential, but only 4% out of this number start entrepreneurship activity, and then a really tiny percent which is involved in technological entrepreneurship. So if we compare it with Tel Aviv, so I'm sure that this number will be completely different. And then we perform separate great bulk of work in regards to not only students but to the youth up to 40 years old, that we would have bigger number of this layer of population. And the second moment is infrastructure. So we've got about 2,000 objects of infrastructure. It's co-working because Moscow is developing fast, co-working wise, and also centers of technological growth where you can use some special equipment and devices in high-tech and engineering sphere. And then technoparks, of course, it goes without saying. It's very important element of urban infrastructure, and it's been directed not only on startups but also on the dynamically developing growing business, and also other facilities, intellectual property center, certification center, and etc., and etc. So if we look at the provision of startups by infrastructure, so this level is rather high. And the third thing is the access to the market. So access to the urban city order, and then also going into other commercial markets, not only in Moscow, but which are really available or could be available for startups. So for us, it's important to make this thing when startups are able to participate in urban city purchases and when it's really economically efficient. So this is the third serious direction. And the fourth one is the funding issue. Venture capital in Moscow and in Russia has not sufficient level. So that's why when the city Moscow government deals with some tools which help startups to get some funds as subsidies or subsidiary services, we've got special venture foundation in Moscow, and we're developing the activity of this foundation. As for the loans to startups, so it's actually the loans practically without collaterals. So all this means of support, they're being focused on this foundational initiative is cluster, technological cluster, when we are able to provide cooperation between all elements, and also a very important element which is related to academic science with different scientific academic institutes. We've got about 700 organizations of that kind, and they have ability to make a great input in the development of the city. So we have to develop this potential in the future. And the cooperation is impossible without establishing necessary infrastructure. In our case, it's communicative platform which allows to combine all the measures of support at one site, and then depending on the necessity of the participant of the cluster, either it is innovative company or higher education institute or some provider of high-tech services. So this company can pick and choose necessary tool to be developed. And also, it will be a platform of interaction of all these elements. It's a rather crucial moment as well, because cooperation is that potential which requires substantial development as well. So, in relation to technological entrepreneurship, so just in a nutshell, so in Moscow, we've got a lot of elements which are well advanced and breaking ground elements. So at least in two rating assessment, Moscow has advanced a lot. So FDI rating is the first one. It's the parameters of business climate. Moscow was taken into top 10 megapolises for the good business environment. So if we go deeper, technological business is one of the most important features. And then Startup Link, it's one of the most well-known ratings for startups development. So, and Moscow is in top 10 as well. So it means that our potential is huge. Thank you very much, Alexei. So one short question to our speaker, because we are running out of time. So if you don't have any questions, if you remember this question, we will be able to do it later. Another Alexei Removich. So previous speaker already touched on the importance of the topic of academic scientific organization. And we know that all these ratings where Moscow is not on the first places. So this very component as human resource, Moscow is in top rating for this feature. And it's not really surprising because the quantity of universities and especially of scientific organizations in Moscow are concentrated in Moscow big time. So, Alexei, I would like to ask you a question of that kind. How can you see the role of scientific research, R&D organizations in the combination of the development of the city? So, as our speaker said in the beginning of our discussion, where the city were like a place of birth of technologies, and I guess that Moscow has a huge potential in that regard. Can you comment on that? Thank you, Alexei. Well, you already said that Russian Academy of Science is a federal resource, and of course we're tightly cooperating with Moscow City Council, and just a year ago we signed serious agreement with the City Council, and Mr. Mayor Sobyanin visited us, and we've discussed a lot of issues. And one of the things we authorized the special prize for young scientists in Moscow. So half of these prizes are devoted to academic sphere, another half to technological sphere. And we held a huge ceremony in big Kremlin Palace, Great Kremlin Palace. Now it's called like that. And so we've been working a lot on the establishment of technoparks in academic institutes, academic science institutes. And so there are some directions on which we work pretty actively, and one of the topics and tests of ours is to include that human potential into technological cluster of Moscow. Just soon, in a week, we will have a first session of supervisory committee of technological cluster, and what we would like to notice here. Of course, you're absolutely correct that concentration of the scientists and people who are occupied with the creation of new technologies in Moscow is pretty high. If it's not 50, well, for sure it's 40% from the all human potential resource of that sphere in Russian Federation. And we have to use it for sure. So in Moscow we have a lot of industrial production facilities, startups, technological companies, and if we create such a platform where we can unite the representatives of all these companies and also representatives of the science and education, so synergy effect could be really huge. So, besides that, I would like to emphasize what Leora Schechter noticed.
People. So, мы должны.
And so we have to be really founded and start with the topic of organizations, but of people who are able to participate in technological development of this city. And it's very important that this cluster would break through, would get through to all these scientists and professors of institutes who are able to do that. So large business, major business of Moscow have to formulate the task correctly, and the scientists could offer the solutions of those problems. And so key point in that regard is the platform where all these two groups of people would be able to share their opinions, and of course they have to get online interfaces for sharing their ideas, and at the same time offline platform. So it could be some kind of a site in the city where we can discuss the problems, issues, and look for the solutions for these problems. And we can collaborate with these people who work in Moscow and who can input in the technological development of Moscow. So I guess it's one of the major and serious directions. I guess that Urban Forum in some separate discussions become such a site, such a platform for discussing necessary questions and tests, and then it's been given to the scientists, and after that I guess that we'll have more questions. So questions to our speaker. So let me give the floor. We talk a lot about startups, and it would be really strange not to ask this question to the expert from that sphere. So we've got Alexander Hanin, and I would like to ask him to comment from his point of view. So not only from institutional side of a coin, but you see, Alexei touched on this importance of the topic of separate entrepreneurs and scientists. So if we take their opinion, so what kind of perspectives and opinions do you have? Maybe you've got some questions. So I've got a couple comments. So first one is on the collaboration with the city. So we have to understand the success rate of the pilot testing projects. You see, because we're said, you show us the efficiency first, but who sets those standards, this bar? What is successful, what is not? So can you give us at least one example If we talk about safety on the road movement, there is a death rate indicators for transportation system. So we can decrease those numbers per like 100,000 people per capita. And for 1 year, it's enough to test the system in operation, and another one, throughput capability of intersections, of crossroads, of transportation hubs, because very often city doesn't know what does it want really. And how would you offer to resolve this issue? But how to set this interaction correctly? We have to correct some working groups, and when city declares terms of reference for some project, so in that initiative we have to see both scientific representative and business representative. So if we talk about scientific environment, we face this issue pretty often, that we've got a lot of startups, but they're not all good. And some startups, they want to get the contract by all means, and then to put this token contract with the city on their website and to use it in the future. So if the city will be really interested in the offer of academic scientific community and really understand is it really relevant, because there are so many offers which really violate physical laws.
Больше экспертизы, хорошей.
I see. So you're calling for more expertise. Yes. So how do you filter out those startups which have inadequate ideas? Okay, if that's it, I'd like to give floor to other speakers. So it's not just about startups. We have large industry players, and even in Tel Aviv, which is a city which has the highest share of startups per capita, there are still factories and large industrial facilities in Tel Aviv, and we have representative from a couple of branches of industry here, and I'd like to ask you the one and the same question. Let's say there is a large industrial player like Renault. Renault has a factory in Russia. How can a large industrial player come up with an idea about technologies which can improve the quality of city life? So, I mean, a technology which will not only help the corporation or an industry player itself, but also will contribute to the market development and contribute to improving the quality of life in the city. So could you comment on this, please? Okay, thank you, Alexei, for an interesting question. I think the answer is as follows. We live through the fourth industrial revolution and the fourth transportation revolution, and so we're all affected by these trends, and large corporations together with the scientific community are defining the trends which will then set new paradigms for business and for the nation. So let me briefly go through these trends which are currently emerging in cities and in urban life. The first trend is megalopolization. Large cities are sprawling, and we live through the renaissance of the nomadic times, because people keep commuting and keep traveling. So one of the most successful businesses in future would be transportation business. So transportation solutions crafted in cooperation with startup companies will be a successful business. Also, circular economy. We don't have too much time. Could you please shorten your statement down to, let's say, one bullet point? Talking about Renault, together with, in collaboration with the Moscow government, we set up Reno Digital Hub in Technopolis, and we will keep taking care after these solutions, and thus we contribute to building up a better and a happier urban environment. Mikhail? Thank you very much for the question. I think that companies which operate in the city cannot grow unless the city grows itself. And I was delighted to listen to Mrs. Leora's presentation. And I agree with the point she made. We need to ensure the change of mentality in our people. So, and that is something that will bring us results, regardless of all those high-tech bits of equipment which we may use. If we don't ensure this change in the mindset, then we will never get there where we want. I don't quite agree with Alexei, and here is why. I like ideas about setting up technoparks and technopolises, but our company values its intellectual property, and these companies like us, they try to keep away from these technoparks and technopolises because they don't want we don't want our commercial secrets to be made public. So, and this is the area for future development, I think. Okay, thank you very much, dear colleagues. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and as a moderator, I will take the liberty to make one more statement. In 1 year from now, we'll have another meeting, either here or somewhere else, and we will have another discussion about tech development of cities, because tech development is the process which will support city growth, at least in the upcoming several years. And Moscow will keep growing, will keep improving its performance rating-wise, but all these ratings don't always properly reflect reality. So I do hope that we'll see more happy startups telling us about their success, the success which was achieved in collaboration with Moscow government and Russian Academy of Science. Thank you very much.